later this week. Okay, well, now that we have our housekeeping out of the way, I am very happy to introduce Stephanie Anderson from the Albany Public Library. Stephanie is I'm going to get this right, she is the head of collection management services. You can correct me if I'm wrong, at the Albany Public Library. She also has her MSIS in Archives and Records Management from the University at Albany. And prior to working as a librarian, she was a lead bookseller and merchandising manager for Barnes and Noble. So she has lots of experience with books and lots of experience with kids' books. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Stephanie and take it away.
Great. Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Megan. Hi, I'm Stephanie. As Susan said, I am the head of collection management services at Albany Public Library. I have been in this role, I want to say, since November of 2018. And before that, I was a youth services librarian at various branches in Albany Public Library, the system. I also blame this audit, and I want to blame it on and thank my wonderful collection management services staff. I have a team of 4 in my department. 3 of them are currently hushed because I am in our shared office giving this presentation, and I know one is also attending as she works from home today. I blame this on them. This was their idea because we did a webinar together, and I said, hey, this sounds like something we should do, and no one said, yeah, don't do this. So let's start. My presentation is called a diversity audit of juvenile picture books. What we did, what went well, and what we would never do again. And my mouse. So yeah, it started in 2019 with a webinar. CMS staff, we all took the Evaluating, Auditing, and Diversifying Your Collections that was offered by Library Journal and School Library Journal. At this point, it has become Diversifying Your Collection. I'm sure everybody has seen these ads. They come out 2 or 3 times a year. If you haven't taken one, I actually do highly recommend it. It was very helpful. We did this in the fall of 2019, and then 2020 happened. And everything that happened in 2020 happened. And as a result of that, the senior leadership team at Albany Public Library did a lot of intensive diversity, equity, and inclusion training. So it was at the end of 2020 when I approached our director and asked, hey, can we do a diversity audit of our collection? And as a disclaimer, I'd also like to state that with the folks who participated in the diversity audit, we were not the most diverse group doing this, but it was something that we felt was important to do based on the community that Albany Public Library serves. And we're still working on it. So what my proposal looks like, I'm not going to read all of this, but essentially we have never done a diversity audit of the collection. We had only recently completed a collection inventory during the pandemic when we were shut down. And what we really wanted to highlight was, do we have representation of our community within our collection? We all have assumptions as librarians, and we have assumptions as selectors of, yes, we're getting diverse books, and yes, we're creating a holistic collection. But we really couldn't track that or show that in any meaningful way to our stakeholders. And the other thing that I think goes hand in hand with this, in 2018, when I took over CMS that November, I had to decentralize ordering for the system. So librarians are no longer ordering the books in their individual branches. When we went to centralized ordering, it was a smaller group of selectors. So by doing a diversity audit, it would also help selectors make sure that when we are selecting books for our branches, that we're also making sure that we have balanced collections and that representation. And that also really helps with the proposal and to get support from administration to do this project. So the planning process. After doing some webinars and running reports in our database, the collection was too big, and we decided to start smaller. The reason we chose picture books, for me at least, it is a little personal. It goes back to when I was first working in a library as a library assistant, and I was looking for a picture book about Hanukkah in my physical collection in the branch where I was working. And I typed Hanukkah in as a subject keyword search. all types of searches back in Horizon when that was the ILS that Upper Hudson used. And for the location where I was working, using the database, I could not find a book about Hanukkah for children. And yet when I got on my hands and knees and was looking in the cubbies, which is, youth services librarians know, the picture books are always cubbies. They're sort of crab walking along the collection looking for your book. I was able to find 5 Hanukkah books within the collection, but I couldn't find them in Horizon just by doing a keyword search. So I wanted to start with juvenile picture books because of how they're cataloged, how they come to us prepared from the publishers, really. The publishers are creating those subject headings. So we know there's imperfect records for these picture books. And you can't really evaluate them just on subject headings alone in your ILS. So the working group that we had was a staff member who was a youth services librarian in one of each of our 6 branches that were open at that time. The 6 of us, and I think 7, we would meet on Zoom because this was still during 2021 when we were not in the branches physically. We couldn't really see each other. So we did a lot of meeting and prep and talk over Zoom, and we started the audit in 2021. So yep, the 6 branches, the 6 picture book collections, 6 different opinions. So when you go into the planning process, think about who you're going to be working with and how that is going to work and how large your collection is. It will make a big difference. And yeah, we're back to 7 as of Monday. So yeah, the prep we decided when we looked at what was in our ILS, I believe even now the number is something like 20,761 books listed in the juvenile picture book collection code. So what we did even before starting the audit was every branch weeded. They did a very good weed of the juvenile picture book collection just to remove the books that really weren't going out anymore. Why audit something and evaluate something if you're going to remove it from the collection in the next 6 months? We also really wanted to work to clean up the ILS, which at this point we are now using Sierra. So I did go through and I removed a lot of missing, damaged, unsearched items. And that took a lot. I also created a location code for a type of material that was in the juvenile picture book location, but it wasn't really a traditional picture book, like 8x8, readers, board books. When you're evaluating your data, when you run those shelf lists, you're going to catch some things that maybe how they were cataloged 10 years ago isn't how you're cataloging them now. So in that prep for the audit, we were able to really sort of key into just picture books. Also just a certain type of picture book. We really wanted to try to avoid some of our specialty collections, just because we knew when you look at the numbers, Pine Hills branch alone had 4,000 titles. Washington Ave had 3,000 titles. And we wanted to make sure that staff were using their time wisely when they touched these books, because with picture books, what this meant was staff would be using their time on desk or off desk and going book by book, reading it and evaluating it. And another part that was a challenge for the working group was creating the Google Sheet. We had to decide what we were going to audit, what we were going to look for, how we were going to describe those things. We decided to do primary character and secondary character in the picture book. And as youth services librarians know, sometimes the primary characters are going to be inanimate objects or animals, or there isn't a primary character, it's a cast of characters. So how is that going to be represented on our audit sheet? I also really wanted to look at the makeup and the diversity of the authors, the creators. So we did have categories for the authors as well. And the Google Sheet as it standed when we started is this, and it's small on your screen. So give me a sec and I'll share with you if I can get my button to work. The Chrome sheet. So you should be seeing on Google Chrome our actual diversity audit. And it,
Okay, I think you have
Did you
to
see it?
switch. I think you have to switch which screen you're sharing with. I always do
Did
this.
I do it?
Yep, now I've got it. We've got it.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you. Sorry, guys. All right. So this is the massive document. What? Okay, yeah. So I should be on the tab that says new picture books. And you'll notice there are several barcodes because we also realized as staff were auditing, books were also coming in every single month. So how do we catch those? The solution was to have a CMS staff member audit each and every picture book as it came into the building. So it's multiple barcodes, multiple branch locations, and that exists just on this sheet. If I were to switch to another branch, you will see how this staff member at this branch set theirs up. And with primary character, there is a lot. And in hindsight, going back, I was like, oh, we could have reduced this. We could have made it simpler. And then over here, we also have notes, other socioeconomic interests and themes. We started with own voices, but that stopped halfway through 2019. And then for staff, as they were touching the book, and I have seen this done differently in different webinars, we do have notes if there's anything else that they wanted to talk about. And then I had to add columns later for the fun that is data analysis. So we have a pretty interactive, extensive Google spreadsheet. Let me get back to my slides. And it was useful at the time, but when you get to looking at outcomes, I like to call it data entry gone wild. We started with a branch staff member at the beginning, and then slowly they trained other staff members to participate because it was a larger list than we had anticipated. We started this in March 2021. And in March, it's sort of like the drums start beating that summer reading is coming. So the youth services librarians were also thinking about that, and they were training other members of staff, library assistants, and I believe we had some clerks assisting at some locations. So there was some creative data entry in the descriptions. My personal favorites are the race and ethnicity of a primary character was boat. We also had someone select which. And then I know who this last one is, and we got in a very heated discussion about it over lunch. But the secondary character is an alien. So since it isn't an animal and we didn't know if it was sentient, they didn't know how to list it within the secondary character column. So this was fun. This will, however, make data collection a little more difficult at the end of this process. So that's why going forward with our audits of new books, I'm going to actually switch to a Google form. And even though this template is great if you are one building and you have a set number of staff working on it and your collection is more controllable, but if you have multiple locations, multiple collections, and multiple staff, you might want to use a Google form where you have very specific headings and things chosen and there isn't room for entry. And that might help prompt staff to say, oh, hey, if I can't select it, maybe this isn't something we're actually auditing for. And I think that's what happened. There was also a very cheeky one about a carrot and a banana, but the staff member later went back and fixed it. So the initial audit results, I think it had gone on for 6 or 7 months, and we were really looking at the numbers, and we were seeing, actually, they're pretty decent. So what happened was with staff was it really is essentially a sample set. It's a sample size of the data. A lot of branches didn't get as far as they would have hoped. As I said, summer reading was coming. This was also 2021 leading into when Albany Public Library stopped doing its pandemic operations plan. So we went from being closed to open. So there were staffing shifts, and doing the audit in a pandemic, in hindsight, probably not the best timing. So staff on the ground stopped doing as much of the work. I would send out requests and pull in books after the fact, but the numbers that I was seeing actually surprised me. In some locations, I thought it was going to be less diverse than what we actually wound up with. Midsummer 2021, also, there were some other services that became available that I started to use as well. So yeah, like I said, there are no mistakes, only happy little accidents. And I feel like we had some of those with this planning process and implementation, but we also learned a lot from it, which we're using now going forward. So pretty much what to do differently if you're going to start thinking about doing an audit. And based on the size of your collection and the scope and what you want to cover, really do try to use a form, something that your staff can't. Interpretation is great, discussion is great, but it's going to make the data collection hard. Become a Microsoft Excel expert. Yes, you will be doing more downloading and mushing together of data from different sets from what your staff create when they do the audit, also from your ILS. And then if you purchase a data collection tool, you're also going to need to download and export that and make that mesh. So things like deleting duplicates or pulling out random sample sizes, editing things for if staff, instead of doing author's last name, author's first name, it's a jumble, having the split and the time and the planning, you don't think it matters to have first name and then last name in separate columns. But then when you compare to how things are pulled out of a data collection tool and set up, you're going to realize how you have your initial audit form formatted is going to make a difference if you want to do any comparisons down the road. So those little minutia in data creation are going to have an impact. I would add social emotional learning to the audit. Again, this is going to be a multi-use tool for us after I put it together into a more usable format that staff can't edit. Right now, it's very editable. Social emotional learning is a trend that we're seeing in picture books, and I would like to have had that as a character, as a category. And it is hard to find biographical information on authors. You get off of the dust jacket or Google or Wikipedia or the publisher website. And it is also hard to get illustrator information. But again, this is something we're still not getting from publishers. So I wish we had added illustrators, even though I know it would have been imperfect. I still would have liked to have seen the breakdown of illustrators and representation that way within the collection. So halfway through 2021, Collection HQ did start including diversity, equity, inclusion module in their programming software. And Albany Public Library already had Collection HQ. So since we were an existing customer, this is something we got to take advantage of. We didn't really have to wait and we didn't have to pay for an extra service. Collection HQ is not perfect. It doesn't replace doing a physical audit of the collection. Collection HQ is still pulling from BISAC headings and it's still pulling from Library of Congress subject headings. So if you have a picture book that doesn't have those or it has incomplete ones, you are not going to see it in Collection HQ. And let me show if I can do this again. All right, so when I pop into my DEI module, which I thought I had open, my other beef with Collection HQ is that every month I lose this. But right now, when I look at juvenile fiction, which includes picture books, I'm still at about 19%. The goal overall that I want to have for Albany is to be at 20% DEI in our collection to start with. And this ebbs and flows with monthly reading. I can dig deeper, but month to month, once Collection HQ updates their data set, I lose this. So every month I have to print this. And then if I wanted to, I could see by each category. Yep, there we go. So do you guys see these lovely little exports? So when I say get to be an export genius, these are the exports that you can export what Collection HQ says your collection has. And then you need to compare it to your current holdings. So you're comparing this to Microsoft Excel spreadsheets. Super, super fun. And every time your staff lead, these numbers are going to shift. So sometimes the numbers go up and down, and that gives me a little palpitations. But right now, we're still pretty steady overall, and it can tell me titles system-wide and percentage system-wide right now for titles, removing the duplicates at all the branches. We're at about 19.6. And when we started using Collection HQ, we were much lower than that. We were about 17.2. So over a year and a half, just by adding new titles and being conscious of what we're purchasing, we've improved the DEI. We've improved the diversity of the collection. But it's going to be a constant work in progress. So back to, where'd it go? Okay. So outcomes. I know there are services out there that can take your catalog and look at your juvenile picture book collection holdings for you and give you an idea of what your diversity breakdown is. But there's a little part of me that is a little Machiavellian that really wanted staff to do a deep dive into what was in their branch. In 2019 and 2020, we had a lot of staff changes, especially within new services. So in March 2021, in 4 branches, I had youth services staff who were new to those collections. They'd worked for Albany before, but in different collections in different buildings. So it's one thing to say, oh, I know juvenile picture books. I've ordered juvenile picture books. I do story time. But it's another thing to really get in and look at what is physically in your building. And it's something that staff don't always have the luxury of time to do. So with this project, they were encouraged to weed first. And from that weeding, I got a lot of feedback, especially from 2 locations of like, wow, what was this book doing here? Hasn't searched in 10 years. How did this get missed? Or, hey, we have holes in this subject. What about other things? So having staff do an on-hand physical inventory and audit, it does seem like a lot, but you get that added benefit of staff really learning what is in their buildings better. Since we started the audit, March in 2021, CMS staff member Chris Havens has painstakingly audited every single new juvenile picture book that Albany Public has purchased. And when I ran those numbers last night, it looks like it was over 750 titles. And that is something we're going to continue to do going forward, because we know that books get weeded, Collection HQ isn't perfect, and it's also a great measure of when we are purchasing. Again, it's just another check and balance of, are we really purchasing diverse, inclusive titles for that collection? And it's going to contribute to what the audit form is going to become in a month or so, which will be a very useful tool for youth services librarians. Currently, Albany Public Library does not have a lot of in-house readers advisory tools. And we have 7 branches. And I think this tool will be helpful for librarians if they need to quickly find a title and they want it to be on a certain topic, but maybe they don't want it to be a historical topic or a hard topic, but they have families asking for something or patrons asking for something. This is just one more resource for them to use. And also with that audit tool, what I am doing is monthly, I'll take a few titles, I check for them in my Collection HQ report. And if I don't see them in Collection HQ, there is a functionality in Collection HQ where librarians can add titles to their database. So if there is a book that staff have identified as having certain subject headings that it needs, I can add that to Collection HQ so it'll appear in future reports. And then I can also make changes within our own database to improve those subject headings. So that leads into some of the larger outcomes of this project. CMS has watched more webinars, so I've gotten more ideas. The green one is a link. I highly recommend folks take a look at it if you haven't already watched it. It's the Change the Subject project, which was, I believe, also influenced by Change the Subject out of Dartmouth, and I have that on another slide. We also did Tackling Racism and Bias in the library catalog. And I can't read the last one. But yeah, oh, decolonize the catalog, anti-racist description practices for authority. Sorry, my laptop is blocking the last one, but that was a RUSA webinar. When we looked at picture books, and again, the subject heading, and again, the data I was seeing from Collection HQ, there are discrepancies in what staff are identifying within the book. And we wanted to make titles more accessible and also more discoverable within Sierra. And then the OPAC that our patrons use is Encore. Because they should have better subject headings. Just because they're picture books doesn't mean they only get 2 subject headings. And again, more webinars. Part of this, the Upper Hudson Library System, the Cataloging Advisory Council, which I'm a member of, all of us watched a webinar that was based on Change the Subject. I have the link here. If you haven't seen it, again, I really recommend it. And UHLS started also looking at adult subject headings. What subject headings do we have in the catalog that maybe we shouldn't have anymore? I don't know if I opened this one up, but so far, if you go to this blog, which is on the Upper Hudson Library System training website, that cataloging group, I let Xiaofei Li, who's our main primary cataloger in our department, she was part of this group, and librarians from Bethlehem and Guilderland and all over Upper Hudson participated in getting rid of subject headings that have no place in our catalog anymore right now. And they did a great job, and that kickstarted in 2021 in the spring. And I believe that is also ongoing as more subject headings are brought to our attention to clean out of MARC records and to improve them. And we started using local subject heading indicators, which will also now show up. Sorry, that's some cataloger lingo. So there was some back-end stuff and back-end changes that Upper Hudson had to make with our subscription to Sierra to make sure that our local subject headings were visible and viewable and searchable. And I think that's had an important impact. And I'm glad it's a project that they undertook. And I think it is going to continue as more things we find that need to be updated. And again, the work continues. All of us in the department are not necessarily new to cataloging, but there's a lot still to learn. So again, I'm going to have us take another webinar to jumpstart inclusive cataloging to make sure that the words that we're using, the language that we're using, the subject headings and the formats, that they're correct and that we're doing what we should be doing. And again, with juvenile picture books going forward in an effort to make Albany Public Library's collections more searchable, I think this is important. And it's something that the team is going to start focusing on going forward. We also have been doing some reverse auditing of how we order. And it's something that I can do with our vendors. So yeah. So with reverse audit, we can ensure that we're purchasing those diverse and inclusive collections. And there's a quick way to do it depending on who your vendor is. B&T's Title Source 360 is on the left. And then I have the exact same book on the right in iPage. Albany Public Library subscribes to both. I use Baker and Taylor and I use Ingram, which came in really handy when Baker and Taylor was down for 5.5 weeks. I had to switch and pivot and get everything out of Ingram, and that's fine. When I download lists from Ingram, I get some better buy stat categories. I get a better idea of what I'm going to have in those carts. So I've actually taken to looking at my Baker and Taylor carts, importing them into an Ingram list. So I can download it and evaluate it. And that looks like, oh, where'd it go? I have it, oh, there it is. That looks like this. So this was a cart that was submitted last month. It's debut authors. We go back and forth. And when we're looking at the makeup of this cart, it looks like there are 14 debut authors, 11 out of 14 of these titles fall into a DEI category, which I believe is at about 78% DEI. So this is awesome. This is also where we're seeing a lot of the DEI representation in publishing right now is with debut authors. So sometimes when you're hesitant to get a debut book or someone who's never published before, take a shot, take the risk. get that book, get it in your collection. I don't know if you've been reading what some larger box stores are going to do, where they're going to be stocking less debut authors. So this is something important for libraries to pick up. And then this one, it looks like a lot of good stuff. Oh, I was looking at one yesterday. It was like all crime and thriller. It was another cart where I did a DEI audit, and it was just all crime books. Still fantastic. So let's go back to this. So now looking at this cart, following it through, when I go to how my patrons would be viewing this book, which is Baraka Beast. If I'm saying that wrong, I apologize. When I go into Encore, oh, did my session, did it really? Why do you do this to me? Continue session. Yeah. So the subject headings for me are important because if patrons see this and they see something else, they can hyperlink to other things. So yes, this book is about friendship. Yes, it's about rock groups, but it's also about Muslim girls and preteen girls. And if they like this book, these links will take them to other things similar in the catalog. We know how to do that. This is something that will help our patrons do that and help patrons find those titles. So that's why I think having the better subject headings overall and doing reverse audits is important to make sure these books get picked up when you're ordering. And then also with these more accurate subject headings, it'll get picked up in the Collection HQ DEI module every month. So go back to PowerPoint. All right, so resources for this. I would like to say it really did all start, for me at least, with the Karen Jensen model of a diversity audit. I borrowed from a friend who was a school library media specialist, now with a different agency, what she was using in her school when they did an elementary school picture book audit. And the reason now I'm so pro Google form, or if you have the skill set, the Excel form, is because when you have multiple locations and multiple staff and multiple opinions, that Google form is going to get very funky and very interesting. But I still think it's worth going back to Karen Jensen's trainings and on her toolkit to look at how she set it up and why she did it. Diverse Bookfinder is also fantastic. And they're the ones who believe, is it them or, yeah, Diverse Bookfinder. They have a system where I believe it's free, and if you upload some of your database, they do have lists of diverse books from 2002 going to now. So not older titles, but newer titles where they have which picture books are diverse listed. I did not do that because, again, I really did want my staff in the buildings to get into the collections to really see what they have. It's sort of that, it had two purposes, to get them familiar with their collection as well as doing that audit. And then the rest of these links, I've also used quite a ton, but my next slide, this is the best slide for me. I have watched this PowerPoint presentation by Kimberly Powell of the Connecticut State Library. I've now watched it 5 times. So if you have questions about how to get started with an audit, like you really do not know where to start, this is the best resource I have found, and I wish I had had it in 2020 and 2021. I did not discover it until a month ago. But her LibGuide has everything I've already listed on my resource page, and more resources online to articles, videos. Really, it is a great springboard for if you're new to the diversity audit concept of why you should do it, how you organize the data. This is a great place to start. And it is super impactful. And there are going to be pieces of her presentation that I will be using when in another few months, I present this to what I'm hoping would be either like our administrative team. So yeah, I need to sort of make the data a little more accessible, but also this is something that's going to be ongoing. So how do I share that with our administrative team that the juvenile picture book collection audit and the processes that we are doing, and the new things that we're doing with subject headings and editing how we should have things in our Sierra, all of these multi-layered things that I've now come up with. This is just going to be an ongoing project and priority for collection management going forward. And what Kimberly has done with her presentation was just super helpful to me. And I think everyone should go take a look at it. And it's free to watch on the Niche Academy. Again, if you need a jumping off point. So that is what we did. And I guess I can open it up to discussion. I feel like I went through things very fast, but I could keep going for hours, but let's chat.
Yes, thank you, Stephanie. Yes, you did say you could go on for hours. We can, if people have questions, they can either put it in the chat or you can raise your hand and speak. If you look under reactions, there's a thing that says raise hand and we'll call on you. While you were speaking, there was just a couple of comments. One was, let me find it. Well, one was from me because I know I've been in the library and people have been upset about the way things come from the vendors, labels, like it will say African American, but it completely takes place in Africa, or it says Christianity, but like in my branch, it's a big Jewish community. The branch I live near, it's a big Jewish community. And so they were upset by that because it would be Old Testament. So I think that's another thing that you all are dealing with related to this. It makes it hard to find things. And then someone also commented on another thing that you were talking about the subject headings that should be retired. And it sounds like you all are already addressing or attempting to address that. Like you said, such as illegal immigrant.
Yes, that one was taken out of the Upper Hudson catalog. That was one of the first ones that they tackled. Pull that up. So yeah, I feel like with this presentation, it's I like to look at it as less of a how-to, or if you're not ready, don't be afraid to start. It is a daunting project, especially when you sort of look at the collection as a whole. But if you don't have a collection analysis tool, there are still ways to go about this. And you can use just subject headings from your ILS to download reports that way and look at books individually. But I think we felt we had a sense of urgency and timing because initially when we started, we did have the staff time. And we did have staff who were interested. And we did have staff who wanted to participate and do this work in their branches. So we just kind of dove right in. And then new things came up as we were going. And that's why it's still like an ongoing, and there's tweaks that we're going to make to it going forward. But you don't need to have Collection HQ to do a diversity audit because you're not going to get everything represented in Collection HQ anyhow. And if you're in one building and you have a collection that's more controllable, I think this would be something that would be very manageable within a couple of months, depending on how many staff are working on it. So yeah.
Well, I'm going to jump in and ask a question since I had one as you were talking. I'm an Albany Public Library patron, and when you were showing the Collection HQ page that was broken down into categories, like you had a overall percentage, but then it was broken down into categories, whatever, disabilities, Asian, whatever. And I was kind of surprised by the percentages in there based on what I've seen in the libraries. They seem low to me. And so I didn't know if the staff was also doing efforts to like maybe highlight certain titles like physically, or because it seemed low compared to what I see in the library. So that's my question.
Yeah, I think the reason that the percentages are low in Collection HQ is the problem of how they come in catalogs. Collection HQ is only pulling from what is in that item's BISAC or subject heading or Library of Congress subject heading or Dewey subject, or Dewey category for nonfiction. So if an item that is in the catalog and it's older and it's been there for a while, but it's missing some important indicators, it's not going to get picked up by the Collection HQ algorithm. The one that surprised me for certain branches is for Collection HQ has a substance abuse category. And I know topically that is something that we purchased for several branches based on where they're located in the community and other community agencies that are nearby or close, and the type of patrons who will come to the library seeking those types of materials. So I know we've done we've done work purchasing those books, but if they're not cataloged in a specific way, Collection HQ isn't going to catch it. So that's why when stuff comes into the collection, into CMS, we're going to be having to do the work of making sure those records are good, or making sure those records are good enough. And that's why we're sort of updating our in-house standards for making sure those subject descriptions and subject headings are really there. Because Collection HQ, you're correct, I don't think it is representing the full picture of what we do have in our catalog. And that's because of how things were cataloged to begin with. And if it's cataloged in publishing and just chucked out of the publishers with not a lot of information, you're getting something that's maybe going to have one that just says, I've seen it. It's like young adult fiction, and that's it. That's all they give you. And that doesn't help anybody really, especially for discovery or patrons, let alone trying to do an audit.
Great, thank you. So yeah, I'd like to open it up if anyone else has any comments, questions, suggestions, reflecting on a diversity audit you might have done at your institution.
Done it.
Yes. Has anyone else here in the program done one? You can raise your hand or talk. No. Ah, so you're groundbreaker, Stephanie.
No, I know people have done some. Well, don't be scared of doing one. And if you start small, maybe that's the way to go, because then you learn what to do and what not to do going forward. And then you can tweak it as you go. Okay.
Let's see, somebody says, some of our librarians also think about diversity audits when making book suggestions. Oh, and then here's a question from Mary Beth from the Red Bookshelf, who you might know, Stephanie. Can you recommend resources available to the public that has a list of subjects or keywords we can use to help us assess the titles we are sending out? So Mary Beth, if you want to just let people know, you can type in the chat what the Red Bookshelf is. We have a bunch of people who aren't from outside of our region. You can, while Stephanie's thinking about that, you can type that in.
No, I use, I still use Goodreads. I use Goodreads a lot. I do. I use Goodreads a lot. Also, the We Need Diverse Books has excellent book lists. Where did I put the link for the Cooperative Children's Book Center? They also have a list of recommended books, and they're the ones who have been sort of auditing and improving subject heading data on children's picture books for a while now. So they've looked at a lot.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I graduated from there in 1998 and they were starting to do it then. So
yeah,
they have been doing it for a long time.
Yeah. And that link is in green. That one is fantastic. Same with, I believe, Diverse Book Finder. They also have lists. What else? And then every month, if you follow, which you can, even though you're not a library staff member, you can still follow School Library Journal. And every month they have reading resources now. Same with the Librarian's Toolkit, which is open and accessible, and they'll have lists by library staff who have read the books and there's reviews.
And I'll be,
yeah.
I was going to say, I'm going to be sending out links to all these, so do not worry about getting them. Oh, and someone says teachingbooks.net also has a tool. Okay.
Yep.
Oh, and Carrie says, if you have subscribed to Teaching Books, that is. I'm not familiar with that resource, but are you, Stephanie? Is that a school library
It
resource?
might be a school library resource.
Yeah, it's a school library product. A lot of the BOCES in the state, if not all of the BOCES in the state, do subscribe to that for their librarians and students.
Sounds like a good resource.
Yep. Where did I put? Okay.
Okay, Mary Beth says, thank you. These are great to have. Any other suggestions or questions, comments?
Good.
And I'm going to put this out there because I know before we started, Stephanie, you said you would be happy to do this, but Stephanie said that she is happy to talk to people one-on-one about doing this. And her contact information was on that last slide, and I will, if it's okay, I'll send it out again with the resources probably. I'll probably, if I don't get to that tomorrow, I'll send it out in the middle of next week.
Yep. Oh, yeah, no, I have to add a resource to this list. It's Lee and Low. Lee and Low is fantastic. I think everyone has seen the Lee and Low graphic about the breakdown of BIPOC authors in the publishing industry. And they did an audit of the publishing industry. It's great. I can't believe I forgot to leave it off. I use the Lee and Low site a lot as well. And yeah, the slides I could share for the resources. Yeah, I forget. I think it's really Lee and Low.
Here we go. Lee, and it is literally
Is
Lee
that
and Low.
correct, Stephanie? I just Googled that. I'm not sure.
Yeah, yeah.
100% if it's correct.
Lee
It
and
does
Low,
look like it.
multicultural children's book publisher. Yes,
Yes.
yes, they're huge. They did an audit of the industry itself. So the reason we see the types of books we see is because of the industry. And when the industry isn't diverse, you're not going to really get diverse books, unfortunately. So that's why when I said we looked at authors and we looked at, I wish we had looked at illustrators, because I like to make sure that we are purchasing books that are more inclusive and more diverse. And Lee and Low does a really great job of sort of highlighting things and having book lists. So Lee and Low is another great resource. We got a lot. So yeah, I will share all those slides. But yeah. Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Stephanie. I have put in the chat a link to the evaluation for today and a link to the form so you can get a certificate of attendance for today. And I'll also send that out in the email. I'll send that out right after we get off this program. And then look for another email from me with the different resources and that we talked about today. And again, thank you so much, Stephanie. And I know she said she would be happy to answer anybody's questions. If you think of them later and you want to contact her, she would be happy to talk with you.
Yeah.
All right.
So thank you for everyone for attending. Sorry if I was a little nervous or choppy. This is the first time I've done this, but
no, you did excellent.
Our group works pretty hard, and I thought it'd be nice to share that it doesn't have to be perfect to do it. Anyone can do this, and it is important work. So I hope this helps you guys jumpstart something in your agencies. So thank you for coming.